17. Michael Perau. In early 2020 in Georgia, a police officer named Michael Perau was charged in connection with the murder of his wife, Amanda Pardue Perau. Amanda was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head at her home near Lake Oconee. This arrest came after Perau claimed that Amanda had shot herself during an argument. The arrest of Michael Perau, then 43 years old, took place late on a Wednesday, shortly after the incident. He was taken into custody at his sister's house in Newton County. This arrest was made by the authorities following suspicions surrounding the circumstances of Amanda's death. Putnam County Sheriff Howard Sills, who was investigating the case, declined to provide details of Perau's arrest or what was said during the process. However, the sheriff did confirm that Perau had been charged with murdering his wife. The tragic event was preceded by another incident involving Perau. Recently, he had been arrested for simple battery, family violence, and cruelty to children. This arrest was made on January 28th, following a physical altercation between Perau and Amanda. Perau had admitted to drinking and taking prescription medication before this confrontation, which was witnessed by their 8-year-old daughter. Amanda's death occurred while their daughter was at school, sparing her from witnessing the horrific incident. Perau's initial account to authorities was that Amanda had picked up a gun from a nightstand and shot herself during an argument while they were in bed. Sheriff Sills, however, was cautious about accepting this explanation. He stated that he was faced with either a self-deletion or a murder investigation based on Perau's statements. The situation surrounding Amanda's death raised questions, particularly due to the history of family violence in the Perau household. The sheriff hinted that there had been ongoing issues, indicating a lack of tranquility since Perau's earlier arrest for violence against his wife. In 2021, the case went to trial, and Perau was found guilty of felony murder, malice murder, simple battery, and aggravated assault. And as a result, he was sentenced to life behind bars without the possibility of parole. 16. Patrick Hemingway. In 2023, a 37-year-old former police officer named Patrick Hemingway, residing in Glastonbury, was arrested and charged with burglary in East Hampton, Connecticut. Hemingway was suspected of being involved in a string of approximately 45 burglaries across Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. He primarily targeted restaurants and focused on safes and cash registers. The arrest stemmed from an incident at Loco Perau restaurant on High Street in East Hampton, where Hemingway allegedly stole the cash register containing $150 to $200 on March 8, 2023. This burglary occurred shortly after Hemingway had attended training at the Glastonbury Police Department. Upon responding to the restaurant's alarm at 1:50 a.m., East Hampton Police discovered the stolen cash register and estimated damages totaling around $2,000. Surveillance footage from Lakeside Bar and Grill nearby captured a person matching Hemingway's description attempting to break in. However, the footage did not confirm the actions conclusively. Hemingway had previously served as a police officer in Glastonbury from January 2019 until his resignation on September 1, 2023. Before that, he worked with the New Britain Police Department from August 2009 until joining Glastonbury PD. In addition to the East Hampton burglary charges, Hemingway was suspected in other incidents, including a burglary at Pizza Palace in Old Saybrook in May. He faced charges of burglary in the 3rd degree, criminal mischief in the 1st degree, and larceny in the 6th degree related to these crimes. Moreover, Wethersfield police had announced an arrest in connection with a February 2023 burglary at Old Wethersfield County Store, with a suspect named Patrick Hemingway implicated. The arrest warrant from East Hampton referenced these Wethersfield charges. It noted that the suspect in that case wore the same distinctive jacket seen in the Loco Perau surveillance video. Hemingway's legal troubles extended further when he was arrested in September 2023 for allegedly misusing law enforcement systems, potentially to check if investigators were tracking his activities. As of the latest records, Hemingway remained in police custody on a $1 million bond, awaiting court proceedings scheduled for January 5, 2024. As of writing, it's now April 2024, and no updates on the case have been released. 15. Lacy Fields. Off-duty Alexandria police officer Lacy Fields was involved in a disturbance at an IHOP located on MacArthur Drive in May of 2018. The incident prompted a response from Alexandria police after receiving reports of a fight at the restaurant. A uniformed officer working security at IHOP was among those who responded to the scene. This officer witnessed two females, one of whom was identified as Lacy Fields, aged 23 at the time, engaged in a physical altercation inside the restaurant. The responding officer intervened to separate the women and de-escalate the situation. Subsequently, both females were taken outside so that the responding officer could gather information for a report. Unfortunately, though, the altercation reignited, prompting the officer to once again attempt to intervene. During this second attempt, Lacy Fields allegedly assaulted the responding officer. Despite efforts to subdue Fields, she continued to resist and fight back until she was eventually handcuffed and placed under arrest. The responding officer sustained injuries during the altercation and sought medical attention afterward. Following the incident, detectives pursued further legal action against Fields, seeking an arrest warrant for felony battery on a police officer and resisting an officer with force or violence. This led to Fields being contacted and peacefully taken into custody on May 22nd. After being questioned by detectives, she was transported to the Rapids Parish Detention Center, where she was booked on the specified charges. Unfortunately, there have been no updates on the case since 2018, leaving the outcome unclear. 14. Jason Bragg McIntosh. The tragic story of Megan Louise Montgomery and her estranged husband, Jason Bragg McIntosh, unfolded in Birmingham, Alabama in late 2019. 31-year-old Montgomery was fatally shot in a parking lot at a Mountain Brook athletic complex on December 1st. McIntosh, a former police officer, ultimately pleaded guilty to her murder. Initially charged with capital murder, McIntosh entered a guilty plea to a reduced charge of murder and received a 30-year prison sentence under a plea agreement accepted by Circuit Judge Shonda Craig Owens. This sentencing allowed for potential parole consideration after serving 85% or 15 years of his sentence, whichever is less. The relationship between Montgomery and McIntosh was troubled from the start. They married in early 2018 and separated just a year later following domestic disputes that resulted in Montgomery being wounded by a gunshot. McIntosh, who was previously a Hoover police officer, resigned from his position in March 2019 after the incident. Montgomery's family spoke emotionally during the court proceedings, describing the devastating impact of her death. Her mother, Susan Montgomery Clark, shared how the relationship had gradually become abusive, leading to Megan's eventual demise. Despite efforts to seek legal protection, including filing for a protective order, Montgomery was unable to escape the escalating violence inflicted by McIntosh. Following Montgomery's death, McIntosh was identified as a suspect and was subsequently surrendered to law enforcement. Investigations revealed a history of threats and violent behavior by McIntosh, further emphasizing the danger Montgomery faced. Montgomery was described as a compassionate individual with a love for animals and community service. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Montgomery's family urged awareness and action against domestic violence. They stressed the importance of recognizing the signs of abusive relationships and intervening to prevent similar outcomes. Jason Bragg McIntosh's guilty plea and sentencing brought closure to a painful chapter for Montgomery's loved ones. 13. Gina Meer. In 2023, Gina Meer, a former NYPD officer, pleaded guilty to providing confidential law enforcement information to her boyfriend, Andrew Dunn, who led a dangerous gang called the Shooting Boys in the Bronx. The information Meer shared allowed Dunn's gang to intimidate a witness and avoid arrest while Dunn was wanted for murder. Mester served as an NYPD officer from July 2013 to May 2022. She was stationed in the Public Safety Unit for the 52nd Precinct in the Bronx. In June 2020, her unit focused on reducing gun violence in the area, and this led Mester to begin communicating with Dunn, who was responsible for much of the violence in the University Heights neighborhood. Mester and Dunn started an intimate relationship during which Mester betrayed her oath by feeding confidential law enforcement information to Dunn. She shared details about a federal grand jury investigation into the gang, including a warning that authorities were preparing to bring a federal indictment against them. Mester also informed the gang about police operations, allowing them to evade law enforcement and hide their criminal activities. In November 2020, Dunn fatally shot a member of a rival gang in the Bronx, and police sought to apprehend him. Despite her role as an officer assisting in the case, Mester covertly informed Dunn of the police search. She also shared a video of the shooting, which provided incriminating evidence against Dunn. Using discreet communication methods, Mester helped Dunn evade authorities and flee the country to avoid arrest. However, in March 2022, federal authorities charged 10 gang members, including Dunn, with various offenses, including racketeering conspiracy and murder. Dunn was later apprehended in the Dominican Republic and pleaded guilty to the charges in November 2022, receiving a 35-year prison sentence. Mester faced a potential sentence of up to 15 years in prison at her sentencing in March 2024. Her actions compromised law enforcement efforts and enabled criminal activity, demonstrating a serious breach of trust and duty as a police officer. In the end, she was sentenced to 70 months in prison, or nearly 6 years behind bars. 12. Vaughn Cannon. An off-duty deputy from the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office was arrested by the Oklahoma City Police Department for allegedly murdering his wife during a domestic dispute in August of 2023. The incident occurred at around 2 a.m. at a residence near Southwest 29th Street and Sarah Road. Responding officers found 40-year-old Jordan Cannon deceased from a gunshot wound inside the home. Her husband, 41-year-old Vaughn Cannon, was present at the scene and was taken into custody. Vaughn was subsequently booked at the Canadian County Jail on murder charges. According to a police news release, investigators determined that the couple had been involved in a heated argument when Vaughn retrieved a firearm and fatally shot Jordan. Both Jordan and Vaughn Cannon served as deputies for the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. The Oklahoma City Police Department has since taken over the investigation of the homicide. During a press conference, Cleveland County Sheriff Chris Amison expressed his grief and anger over the incident. He described Deputy Jordan Cannon as a courageous and compassionate public servant who was tragically killed at her residence. Sheriff Amison emphasized his frustration towards Vaughn for taking Jordan's life in such a senseless act of violence. In honor of Jordan Deputy Cannon, a candlelight vigil was held at the Cleveland County Courthouse to commemorate her life and service. A jury trial is set for May 2024, so we'll have to wait and see what punishment Vaughn receives in the coming months. 11. John Bewley. An off-duty Metropolitan Police Department MPD officer, John Bewley, was arrested for driving under the influence, DUI, while in a patrol car. The incident unfolded at around 3:30 a.m. as officers were dealing with a separate DUI case on Connecticut Avenue Northwest. During the investigation, officers encountered a woman who mentioned that her boyfriend, whom she was speaking to on the phone, was an MPD officer. Shortly afterward, officers noticed an MPD police vehicle driving with its overhead lights activated, which then parked on R Street. Officer Bewley emerged from the vehicle, not in uniform and off-duty. According to court documents, Bewley approached the officers conducting a field sobriety test on the woman involved in the earlier DUI incident. He attempted to interfere and obstruct the test by yelling at the woman and encouraging her to leave the scene with him, despite being told to stay away by other officers. Bewley ignored their instructions and was eventually placed in handcuffs. Officers detected a strong smell of alcohol emanating from Bewley and asked him to submit to a sobriety test, which he refused. As a result, he was arrested and charged with resisting arrest, DUI, and obstructing justice. Following the incident, MPD's Internal Affairs Division revoked Bewley's police powers and launched an investigation. Bewley, a member of MPD's Special Operations Division Emergency Response Team, ERT, had been with the department since February 2012. This case raises questions about MPD's policies regarding off-duty officers using patrol cars and appropriate disciplinary actions for such misconduct. In response to inquiries, an MPD spokesperson confirmed Bewley's arrest and stated that internal investigations were ongoing. This isn't the first instance of an MPD officer misusing a patrol car. In March 2022, former 5th District Commander William Fitzgerald was caught using MPD resources to shuttle himself between bars and his apartment. Fitzgerald retired shortly after the incident, facing fines and an internal affairs investigation. As Bewley's case continues to unfold, 7 News remains committed to seeking clarity from MPD officials on agency standards violations and the potential consequences Bewley may face. 10. Stephen Cornacchia. In 2017, 31-year-old Manchester police officer Stephen Cornacchia was arrested after being involved in a hit-and-run incident while off-duty. The situation occurred at around 1:20 a.m. on West Merrimack Street in Manchester, where Cornacchia struck a 22-year-old woman with his black Ford Mustang while turning. The victim sustained minor injuries and cuts to her leg. Cornacchia briefly stopped to check on the woman before leaving the scene. The victim's friend managed to take note of the car's registration number, leading the police to identify Cornacchia as the owner. Police supervisors located Cornacchia's vehicle at his address, but were unable to find him there. Consequently, a warrant was issued for Cornacchia's arrest. He was suspended from duty on May 15th. The next day, he turned himself in to the authorities. Cornacchia was charged with conduct after an accident for leaving the crash scene without reporting it to the police. This charge is a misdemeanor that carries a possible 1-year jail sentence. Manchester Police Chief Nick Willard said he was disappointed in Cornacchia's actions. Willard described him as a good man who had made a mistake, reflecting poorly on the police force. Following his arrest, Cornacchia was released on $1,000 personal recognizance bail and was placed on administrative leave without pay pending criminal and internal investigations. He was scheduled to appear in court on June 20th, 2017, but the details of that hearing are unclear. In January 2018, just before his plea and sentencing hearing, Cornacchia collapsed at Hillsborough County Superior Court and was wheeled away by paramedics. The final outcome of the case remains uncertain. 9. Henry Capuch. According to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, in December 2022, an employee at Jimmy B's Beach Bar in St. Petersburg Beach discovered a man urinating into an ice machine as they were about to retrieve ice. The man was identified as off-duty Chicago police officer Henry Capuch. At the time, he was vacationing in Florida. When the employee confronted Capuch and asked him to stop, Capuch reacted by swearing and pushing the worker multiple times with both hands. Afterwards, the employee and a security guard led a Pinellas County deputy to Capuch, who was sitting on the beach with his girlfriend. Capuch resisted arrest and did not comply with commands from law enforcement officers. The arrest report indicated that Capuch was actively resisting, yelling, and failing to sit down when instructed multiple times. Authorities suspected that Capuch's behavior was influenced by alcohol, as noted in the arrest documents. Capuch was charged with disorderly conduct and simple battery due to the incident. Capuch had been a member of the Chicago Police Department for 5 years prior to his apprehension in Florida. In response to the arrest, a spokesperson for the Chicago Police Department announced that they had initiated an internal investigation into Capuch's alleged behavior. Pending the results of the investigation, Capuch was relieved of his police powers. It's now 2024, and no further details have been released. 8. Jennifer Melendez. In East Harlem on April 2, 2024, a 39-year-old off-duty NYPD housing cop named Jennifer Melendez was arrested for drunk driving at 8:46 p.m. Responding officers found her sitting in the passenger seat of her car with the vehicle's front tires on the sidewalk, the engine running, and the headlights on, as detailed in a criminal complaint. Melendez allegedly slurred her words and claimed that she had pulled over when she was approached by officers. It was reported that her blood alcohol level was a shocking .248, which is 3 times the legal limit. Nearby on the car floor, police discovered an open, half-empty bottle of tequila, while a can of beer and a vodka bottle were found in the back seat. Melendez was employed at Police Service Area 6 and was responsible for housing in Harlem, as per public records. Following her arrest, she was arraigned at Manhattan Criminal Court the next day. She pleaded not guilty to charges of drunk driving and aggravated driving while intoxicated. The NYPD promptly suspended Melendez without pay upon learning of the incident. Her next court appearance is scheduled for June 5, 2024. 7. Alan Ganer. A road rage incident in Meriden, Connecticut in December of 2023 ended in a physical altercation involving an off-duty city police officer named Alan Ganer. The altercation was recorded by a dash camera, showing Ganer punching the other man involved, Thomas Brocuglio, in the face. The fight led to Ganer's arrest and subsequent permanent removal as a Meriden school resource officer. The incident occurred at a red light on France Street at the intersection of Cromwell Avenue in Rocky Hill. Ganer, who was driving in front of Thomas Brocuglio's vehicle, stopped at the light. Brocuglio honked and gestured at Ganer, leading to a heated exchange that was captured on dashcam footage from Brocuglio's van. Ganer exited his pickup truck and approached Brocuglio. He then displayed his cell phone and badge while hurling expletives. Brocuglio accused Ganer of being on his phone at the red light, which Ganer denied. After taking photos of Brocuglio's van and license plate, Ganer struck Brocuglio through the open driver's side window, then returned to his truck. Brocuglio immediately called Rocky Hill police to report the assault. Following interviews and video examination, Ganer was arrested on December 20th. He was then charged with second-degree breach of peace and third-degree assault. During the internal affairs investigation, Ganer claimed to be embarrassed about the situation and admitted fault to Meriden Police Chief Rob Rosado and Lieutenant Darren McKay. Ganer described his actions as moments of plain stupidity and expressed confusion about the incident due to phasing out during the altercation. Ganer's punishment included a 5-day unpaid suspension for violating department policy and mandatory de-escalation training following his removal from the school resource officer position. He received accelerated rehabilitation, and his charges will be dismissed upon successful completion by January 30th, 2025. 6. Fatal car crash. On January 6th, 2024, tragedy struck for the family of Aquasia Qua Kennedy when she was killed in a car crash on Interstate 30 in North Texas. The wreck involved an off-duty Dallas police officer driving a Jeep Wrangler, but they haven't been identified. Kennedy was pregnant and was just 19 years old. She was traveling with her brother in a Chevrolet Malibu that had stalled and become disabled in the center lane of the highway. As Kennedy and her brother sat in the vehicle with emergency lights flashing, they were struck from behind by the off-duty officer's vehicle. Kennedy tragically lost her life in the crash, but doctors managed to save her unborn baby. The child was born prematurely at 33 weeks with injuries including a broken leg and possible head trauma. The family named the baby Sky Lynn Kennedy, the name chosen by the victim's mother before her death. Kennedy's family was frustrated by the lack of information provided by investigators from the Dallas County Sheriff's Department, who are currently leading the investigation into the crash. They received little detail about the incident beyond confirmation that alcohol or drugs were not involved. Quincy Kennedy, Qua's father, and the family's attorney, Darrell Washington, voiced their concerns about the lack of transparency and communication from investigators. They spoke to the Associated Press about the importance of understanding what happened and ensuring accountability, especially given the severity of the accident. Describing the moment of impact, Quincy Kennedy shared that Qua had instinctively tried to protect her unborn child by positioning herself over her belly. She clutched her brother's arm before the crash claimed her life. Qua, who worked in a nursing home, had been eagerly anticipating her due date of February 24th. The family pointed out the officer's alleged lack of aid after the crash and expressed dismay that his name had not been disclosed by authorities, despite not facing charges. They raised concerns about the officer's potential return to duty while the investigation remains ongoing. To support Skylynn's medical needs and honor Qua's memory, the family established a GoFundMe page for hospital bills and planned to create a scholarship fund in Skylynn's name. 5. Jared Lane Webb. In Idaho in March 2018, Jared Lane Webb, a 39-year-old officer with the Nampa Police Department, was arrested by the Ada County Action Team on criminal charges related to a drug case. The Ada County Sheriff's Office announced that Webb faced one felony count of obtaining a controlled substance by fraud or deception, along with one misdemeanor count of filing a false police report. The arrest came after Webb contacted the Ada County Sheriff's Office approximately 2 weeks earlier to report that prescription medication had been stolen from his home. Webb claimed that he needed to file a police report to obtain a refill of the pills. However, investigators discovered evidence suggesting that Webb had not been truthful about the theft. Following his arrest, Webb was booked into the Canyon County Jail, but was later released on a $50,000 bond. The Nampa Police Department, in a press release, confirmed that one of their officers had been placed on paid administrative leave in connection with the case. Although Webb was not named directly in the release, the department stated that he remained employed pending the outcome of an internal investigation. The department emphasized its commitment to upholding high standards of personal conduct for its employees both on and off duty. A spokesperson stated that the department does not tolerate conduct unbecoming of an officer or violations of the Idaho Peace Officers Code of Ethics. The exact details of Webb's charges, including the timeline of the alleged offenses, were not disclosed by the Ada County Sheriff's Office. The felony charge of obtaining a controlled substance by fraud or deception carries a maximum prison sentence of up to 4 years. However, the outcome of Webb's case remains unclear, as it's been 6 years since the arrest in March 2018. 4. Telvin Wilson. A cop from Arkansas, who previously bragged about being a figure young people could look up to, was arrested in Texas in 2023 after allegedly seeking out inappropriate relations with an underage girl. According to the authorities, the girl turned out to be an undercover cop, catching off-duty officer Telvin Wilson red-handed. 31-year-old Wilson was one of 3 suspects who were charged in connection to the sting operation, which was conducted by police in Texarkana, Texas. To catch the predators, Texas officers posted a fake ad on a website that's known for prostitution. The undercover cop posed as an underage girl when the suspects responded to the ad, even though the undercover agent clearly stated to each suspect that she was a minor. The 3 men, including Wilson, still wanted to meet up and pay for her services. In a statement released by the Texas police, the suspects were shocked when they were greeted by several officers when they showed up at the agreed-upon meeting place. Telvin Wilson was accused and charged with the online solicitation of a minor for sexual conduct. Law enforcement set his bail at $100,000. After finding out about the arrest, the Arkansas Police Department released a statement to Fox News Digital stating that Wilson had been fired. Wilson, who grew up in Texarkana, Texas, started his career in law enforcement in 2016 with the Arkansas Police Department. He reportedly boasted about being a role model for the youth on multiple occasions. And to make matters even worse, he had 2 young children of his own. The other two suspects who were arrested in connection to the sting operation were 37-year-old James Willis and 33-year-old Adarius Wills. All three cases are ongoing. 3. Ryan Quentin. In May 2022, a former St. Charles County Sheriff's deputy named Ryan Quentin resigned from his position and faced a misdemeanor charge after shooting and killing his neighbor's dog with a pellet gun. The incident involved Apollo, a 3-year-old rescue dog from Spain, who was shot in a subdivision. Quentin was charged with animal abuse, which is considered a Class A misdemeanor. A special prosecutor, Tricia Stefanski from Jefferson County, handled the case due to a conflict of interest involving a family member in the prosecutor's office. The dog's owner, Erica Hansen, noticed that something was wrong with Apollo after yard work. The dog was foaming at the mouth, coughing, and collapsing inexplicably. Hansen and her husband, Eric Bacon, couldn't identify the problem, so they rushed Apollo to the vet. But despite efforts to save him, Apollo could not be revived. Subsequent x-rays revealed that the dog had been shot in the lungs with a pellet gun. Sheriff Scott Lewis confirmed that Quentin had worked for the department from August 2020 to June 2022. After the incident, Mr. Bacon filed a complaint with the sheriff's office. Sheriff Lewis started an investigation within the department, and after looking into the complaint, Sheriff Lewis agreed with Mr. Bacon's concerns, which resulted in Quentin making the decision to resign. In a recorded exchange, Bacon confronted Quentin, who admitted to owning a pellet gun when asked if he shot the dog. Quentin identified himself as a sheriff's deputy and questioned why the dog was in his yard, suggesting that it was a pit bull, but Bacon denied this. Bacon made his concerns known about Quentin's position of public trust, emphasizing that his dog was friendly and did not pose a threat to anyone's safety. Following Apollo's death, the St. Charles County Sheriff's Department stationed a deputy outside Quentin's house. The case drew significant public attention, with the county prosecutor's office receiving hate mail and social media attacks. This was due to the involvement of a family member in the office. Ultimately, a special prosecutor handled the case to ensure impartiality. Quentin refused to comment publicly on the incident, and the outcome of the case is unclear. 2. Lindley Allen Hub. Lindley Allen Hub, a former officer with the Torrance Police Department, TPD, was charged with illegal firearms dealing in United States District Court in November 2020. He also admitted to falsely certifying himself as the buyer of a handgun when he was actually purchasing it for someone else. Hub, who was 32 years old at the time, from Long Beach, California, agreed to plead guilty to these offenses. Court documents revealed that during his time with the TPD, spanning 8.5 years, Hub sold a total of 48 firearms without holding a federal firearms license. Additionally, while working as an auxiliary police officer in 2011 for the Pasadena Police Department, Hub sold 2 more guns. Hub exploited exemptions available to him as a law enforcement officer under California law. He sold 36 off-roster firearms, which are guns not directly purchasable by civilians from licensed dealers. Law enforcement officers can buy and resell these off-roster firearms, but Hub abused this privilege by reselling them shortly after acquiring them. He sold nearly half of these guns within 30 days of purchase. Regarding the false statements charge, Hub admitted to providing misleading information on a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives (ATF) recertification form. He did this while purchasing a Glock 9mm handgun in November 2015. He falsely claimed to be the actual buyer of the firearm when he was acting as a straw buyer for another individual. As part of his plea agreement, Hub agreed to cooperate with the investigation and surrender 42 firearms that were in his possession to local law enforcement. In return, the government recommended a prison sentence of up to 18 months. However, the sentencing judge has the discretion to impose a sentence of up to 15 years after Hub pleads guilty. And in November 2020, Hub pleaded guilty to 2 charges, making a false statement in a federal firearm licensee's records during the purchase of a firearm and engaging in the business of dealing in firearms without a license. Hub was scheduled to be sentenced in March of 2021, but the outcome of the case is not publicly available at this time. The investigation was conducted by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, and the FBI. The case was prosecuted by Assistant United States Attorney Elisa Fernandez of the Public Corruption and Civil Rights Section. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Kyle Cotter. In the early morning hours of June 19, 2022, in Campustown, Illinois, an off-duty University of Illinois police officer named Kyle Cotter displayed his badge and gun to a group of people while intoxicated. This incident led to serious consequences for Cotter, who was 28 years old at the time. Witnesses reported that Cotter approached the group at around 2:45 a.m. in a parking lot on East Green Street. He identified himself as a police officer and displayed his badge and weapon, which caused fear among the group. At least one person claimed that Cotter drew his gun before reholstering it. The group was worried they might get in trouble for being drunk in public or having too many people in one vehicle. One woman recounted that Cotter allegedly threatened them, stating they could be shot or arrested if they did not comply with his instructions. He also physically pushed some individuals within the group. As the situation unfolded, one woman stayed behind to talk with Cotter out of concern for her friends. They went to a nearby restaurant where others from the group later joined them. Eventually, they moved to a second restaurant in Campustown. During this time, Cotter was entrusted with holding a woman's wallet, but he later left with it. Hours after the encounter, when the woman realized her wallet was missing, she contacted the police. Authorities then located Cotter and recovered the woman's wallet without any issues. Cotter admitted to police that he had consumed 6 to 8 drinks at a campus bar before the incident and had difficulty recalling the events clearly. He acknowledged showing his weapon and badge as a display of power, indicating that it might have been part of a misguided attempt to impress someone. Following these events, Cotter was charged with official misconduct, a Class 3 felony. And in early 2023, he was officially sentenced to 2 years of probation. As part of his sentence, Cotter was required to perform 150 hours of public service under supervision. He was also ordered to obtain an evaluation for alcohol and drug abuse treatment. Unfortunately, Cotter's actions led to his termination from the University of Illinois Police Department. Judge Brett Olmsted allowed Cotter to be released on his own recognizance pending his court appearances. Cotter was also ordered not to possess firearms and to avoid the University of Illinois property.
11. Combative strip club customers. In April 2023, police officers were driving through the parking lot of an El Paso strip club in search of illegal activity. They noticed something fishy and approached 2 people who were sitting in a car. They asked 29-year-old Damian Ars to step out of the vehicle so they could investigate for suspected marijuana use, but he allegedly tried to speed off. The vehicle struck a police car and several other vehicles and dragged the officers. As police struggled with Ars and a woman in the passenger seat, who was later identified as 27-year-old Taisha Mullen, another driver allegedly revved his engine and drove toward the officers as if he planned to hit them. The reckless motorist managed to flee the scene and the car was later found abandoned. Authorities charged Damian Ars with 2 counts of aggravated assault against a public servant and 1 count of resisting arrest, while Taisha Mullen faces 1 count of assault against a public servant and 1 count of resisting arrest. Police also arrested the man who's accused of taunting the cops by revving his engine and driving towards them. 29-year-old Cantrell James Miller was charged with 1 count of aggravated assault against a public servant. 10. Trevor Bigfoot. All hell broke loose during the famous New Year's Eve celebration in Times Square at the end of 2022. A man from Maine identified as 19-year-old Trevor Bigfoot allegedly attacked NYPD officers with a large machete. He's accused of swinging the blade at several officers, slashing 2 of them in the head and leaving rookie cop Paul Consolino with a fractured skull on his very first shift. Another rookie officer stopped the attack by shooting the suspect in the shoulder. Consolino was in good spirits as he received stitches at the hospital, according to New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who paid the newly sworn officer a visit and commended him for his life-saving actions during his first day on the job. 8-year veteran Officer Louis Iorio also received treatment for a laceration to the head, and Bigfoot was taken to the emergency room for his gunshot wound. Bigfoot had traveled to New York City by train a few days before the attack and was camping out at a park in Queens. In his bag, investigators found a handwritten note to his mother and other relatives, stating that he didn't feel like a good enough person and encouraging her to accept Allah. It was one of the first signs that Bigfoot had been radicalized and that the attack was terroristic in nature. According to ABC News, the young man's mother and aunt had harbored the same fears about his beliefs and had even reported their suspicions to the FBI. Among Bigfoot's possessions, police found a diary containing entries about how he felt let down by his family. Based on the writings, it appears as though he held anti-government and anti-military views and saw his brother as an enemy for serving in the armed forces. Photos from shortly before Bigfoot's transition to Islamic extremism show a seemingly all-American flannel-wearing teen with an innocent boy-next-door look. The recent high school graduate was reportedly a talented athlete and artist with honor roll grades. According to the New York Times, his personality began to change after his father's death a few years before the attack, but he'd only recently become radicalized. He allegedly came to believe that the US government is anti-Muslim and committed himself to waging jihad on domestic soil after his plans to travel to Afghanistan and join the Taliban fell through. Investigators believe that Bigfoot planned on dying during the attack in Times Square in hopes of achieving martyrdom. He's reportedly disappointed that everyone involved in the confrontation survived and considers his mission a failure. While the investigation is ongoing, the evidence so far suggests that the teen acted alone and that he wasn't a member of any terrorist groups. Bigfoot faces multiple state-level charges, including 2 attempted murder counts and several assault and attempted assault charges. He was also federally charged with 4 counts of attempted murder of officers and employees of the US government and persons assisting them. 9. Simone Brer Kim. A Philadelphia-bound Frontier Airlines flight was waiting on the tarmac at Miami International Airport one day in early 2023 when an argument broke out between 2 passengers. Footage of the confrontation showed a woman repeatedly threatening to beat up a male passenger. It's unclear what their disagreement was about, but at some point during the clip, the woman could be heard saying, "You're not even from Philly." After a civilian and a crew member tried unsuccessfully to intervene in hopes of de-escalating the situation, the angry female passenger was ordered off the plane. Later identified as 24-year-old Simone Brer Kim of Killeen, Texas, she allegedly refused to exit the aircraft, prompting the crew to get the police involved. According to law enforcement, Kim became combative as 4 officers struggled to remove her from the plane. She's accused of pushing, pulling, kicking, scratching, and biting the cops, and nearly knocked one of them over. In a video captured by a passenger, Kim could be seen flailing as the officers carried her to a squad car and put her inside. She faces 3 felony charges, including 2 counts of battery on a police officer and 1 charge of resisting an officer with violence. Kim was also charged with several misdemeanors, including 3 counts of assault on an officer and 1 trespassing count. What would you do if someone who was waiting to board the same flight as you began behaving in ways that made you feel unsafe, but staff members didn't see a strong enough reason to stop the person from flying? 8. Candy thief takes on London cops. The London Metropolitan Police Department found itself at the center of widespread mockery in 2023 when footage of a woman taking on 2 cops at once went viral. According to some reports, the 26-year-old suspect was accused of stealing candy from a newsstand, while police later claimed that they responded to the scene over allegations that she had assaulted 3 people. As a growing crowd formed at the scene with their cell phone cameras rolling, the suspect could be seen grabbing one officer's ponytail and swinging her around by her hair. She appeared to handle the cop with ease, despite being in a pair of flip-flops and outnumbered by the responding officers. In one part of the video, she effortlessly pushed away a male officer before shoving a female officer into him. The woman stormed off down the street, but was chased down by the officers as several more cops arrived at the scene to help with the takedown. A second clip that appeared online showed an entire group of officers surrounding the suspect as they subdue her into custody. In a statement, the Metropolitan Police accused the woman of continuing to act aggressive after her arrest and racially abusing the arresting officers. She allegedly assaulted another member of law enforcement while in custody and broke their nose. The crazed candy thief was placed on a mental health hold, and it's unclear what became of the case. 7. Davian Cromartie. During the afternoon of July 14, 2023, officers in Louisville, Kentucky's metro area responded to a domestic disturbance report from a woman who said her boyfriend refused to leave her house and that she wanted him removed. According to an arrest report, 23-year-old Davian Cromartie answered the door and tried to push his way through officers when he saw his girlfriend standing outside. Officers tried unsuccessfully to put Cromartie in handcuffs, and their attempts to take him to the ground also failed. During the struggle, Cromartie allegedly wrapped his legs around an officer's neck and tried to strangle him. Fearing for his life, the officer reached for his gun. Cromartie is accused of pulling on the cop's arm in an attempt to take the weapon. As a second officer rushed over to help her colleague and prepared to deploy her taser, the woman who dialed 911 allegedly jumped on her back and hit her twice in the face. Thankfully, the officer managed to maintain her grip on the taser. As the chaos continued to unfold, Cromartie ran from the scene, damaging a parked vehicle as he fled. Police arrested him later that night when he tried returning to the residence. He faces a multitude of charges, including 2 counts of assault on a police officer and 1 count each of wanton endangerment, disarming a peace officer, fleeing the police, criminal mischief, and violating a protective order out of Virginia. The female suspect, Daria Collins, was charged with assault, attempting to disarm a peace officer, and obstructing governmental operations. 6. Dennis Campbell. To help make safety education a little more entertaining for children, the Kankakee, Illinois Police Department has a mascot named Safety Pup, who often makes appearances at local events. In July of 2023, an officer was tasked with donning the Super Pup costume at a children's event at the Kankakee Public Library, not only to make the kids happy, but because it gives the cops an opportunity to place an incognito officer in plain sight to keep an eye on things. Because Super Pup is the police department's mascot, it would be natural to think that a cop is wearing the costume, but people apparently don't always stop to think about who's behind the disguise. At around 10:30 in the morning during the event, the costumed officer stepped outside the library and was suddenly struck in the back of the head. Witnesses claimed that the blow was so forceful that the officer lost her balance and nearly fell to the ground. According to a police report, she immediately turned around and saw the suspect, 61-year-old Dennis Campbell, mumbling incoherently. She quickly removed the head of the mascot costume and revealed that she was a police officer. Campbell allegedly said that he didn't know that the person inside the costume was a police officer, which still begs the question of why he apparently thought it was okay to hit Super Pup and what his reason was for doing so. He was charged with aggravated battery to a police officer and was released from jail after posting a $100,000 bond. 5. Elias Villa. While responding to a call about a verbal dispute between a man and a woman at an intersection in Kyle, Texas in early 2022, police officers spotted a man wielding a metal pipe. Later identified as 63-year-old Elias Villa, the suspect jumped over a fence and struck a patrol vehicle multiple times with the pipe, despite repeated orders to stop, causing significant damage to the car. Officers used a stun gun to subdue Villa, but it failed to stop him from confronting the cops with the pipe. He turned away briefly, and an officer tackled him to the ground and attempted to disarm him. Villa struck the cop with the pipe, causing minor injuries, and was charged with aggravated assault against a public servant and resisting arrest with a deadly weapon. He he was found guilty on both counts. According to the Hays County District Attorney, Villarreal refused to accept responsibility for his actions and said he had no regrets about the incident. The judge sentenced him to 35 years in prison, setting the example that violence against law enforcement will not be tolerated in Hays County. Villarreal will be 98 years old if and when he sees freedom again. Showing remorse for one's actions or a lack thereof can go a long way in an American courtroom, and it's probably safe to assume that Villarreal's attitude played a significant role in the judge's sentencing decisions. But it's unclear whether the unusually stiff sentence has anything to do with Villarreal's lengthy criminal record, which include previous convictions for voluntary manslaughter, forgery, burglary of a vehicle, and 2 felony family violence-related assault charges. Prior to his most recent run-in with the law, he'd served a 28-year sentence for his crimes. 4. Cameron Batson. During the early morning hours on New Year's Eve in 2022, Atlanta police officers pulled over a suspected drunk driver who was speeding and failing to stay in their lane. The man behind the wheel was identified as 27-year-old Cameron Batson, a member of the Atlanta Falcons practice squad. According to law enforcement, Batson was too drunk to drive. He allegedly resisted violently when officers tried taking him into custody, prompting one cop to fire his gun. Nobody was struck by the bullet, and Batson managed to escape long enough to get in his truck and drive off. He didn't make it very far, though. After crashing the truck during a brief chase, Batson ditched the vehicle and attempted to flee on foot. Officers tracked him down nearby and took him to the hospital for his injuries before hauling him off to jail. He was charged with assault, battery, aggravated assault on an on-duty law enforcement officer, removing a weapon from a public official, and driving while fleeing a police officer. Batson's football career was already lagging at the time of his arrest. After being let go from the Tennessee Titans, he signed on with the Falcons. Less than 3 months later, he was demoted to the practice squad. After his arrest, he posted $95,000 bail and received permission from a judge to travel for work. But the judge's blessing wasn't needed because Batson was let go from the practice squad later that day. He remains a free agent for the time being. Sometimes, when a person isn't in their right mind, they behave in extremely regrettable ways, especially when liquid courage is involved. 3. Micaa Coleman. An airport security checkpoint in Phoenix, Arizona erupted into chaos one early morning in April 2023 when a young woman allegedly attacked TSA agents for taking away her apple juice. As most travelers know, travelers are not allowed to bring drinks past security at airports. In accordance with standard protocol, agents removed 19-year-old Micaa Coleman's beverage as she passed through the checkpoint. According to court documents, Coleman began ranting and raving about the juice and attempted to walk past a barrier to grab a bin of her belongings that was being searched. The young woman is accused of climbing over a table and striking an agent in the head before punching another agent multiple times and pulling their hair. She allegedly bit a third agent who was trying to intervene. 2 of the agents required hospital treatment, and the altercation caused congestion among travelers as the checkpoint was shut down to deal with the situation at hand. In a statement, a TSA spokesperson said that roughly 450 people had to deal with the inconvenience of being redirected to another security checkpoint. Coleman faces 6 federal charges, including 3 counts of assaulting a federal officer resulting in bodily injury, and 3 counts of interference with airport security screening personnel. If convicted on 1 count of the assault charge alone, she could face up to 20 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. 2. Daniel Rodriguez. On January 6, 2021, a 2,000-strong mob of Donald Trump supporters violently stormed the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., in hopes of overturning the recent election of now President Joe Biden. The property incurred millions of dollars worth of damage and at least 138 police officers were injured. Over 1,000 suspects were charged in connection with the riot, and as of July 2023, more than 600 rioters have pleaded guilty, and at least 100 have been convicted in jury trials. One of the stiffest punishments was dealt to 40-year-old Daniel Rodriguez, who drove from California to DC to participate in the rebellion. Described by a federal judge as a one-man army of hate, Rodriguez was accused of going on a more than 2-hour-long campaign of assaults against responding members of law enforcement. He allegedly sprayed a fire extinguisher in officers' faces, shoved a wooden pole at cops, and teamed up with other demonstrators in an effort to force their way through police lines. Prosecutors also claimed that Rodriguez struck Metro DC officer Michael Fanone twice in the neck with an electroshock device while he responded to law enforcement's request for assistance. From there, the unruly protester entered the Capitol and continued along his path of destruction, ransacking officers and working to keep other rioters riled up. When it came time to face the music in court, Rodriguez's lawyers claimed that their client had been fooled by Donald Trump's false claims of the election being rigged. They blamed the defendant's loyalty to Trump on daddy issues and other facets of a troubled childhood, writing in a court document that Rodriguez saw Trump as the father he never had. But Rodriguez himself did not behave like someone who wanted sympathy from the court. During his proceedings, he reportedly reflected on the time leading up to the riot with a nostalgic fondness, depicting it as a time of bonding between people who shared his beliefs and criminal intentions. In explaining his actions, Rodriguez simply said, "I did what I thought was right at the time." He implored the judge for leniency, but was handed a stiff 12-year federal prison term. As he exited the courtroom, he smiled and yelled, "Trump won," at which point any benefit of the doubt being extended toward him likely went straight out the window. 1. Machete-wielding man v NYPD. While patrolling outside the Department of Motor Vehicles in Brooklyn's Coney Island neighborhood one afternoon in May of 2022, NYPD officer John Faval noticed two men fighting over a parking spot. As Faval approached the scene, the disgruntled driver hopped out of his vehicle and charged at the officer with a knife. The officer put distance between himself and the driver, later identified as 57-year-old Richard Paris, while bystanders alerted other cops nearby. Paris allegedly rushed at Faval again, prompting the other officers to draw their guns. They ordered the suspect to drop the weapon, but he continued to chase after Faval with the knife in his hand. One of the officers shot at Paris 4 times, striking him in the leg and shoulder. One witness told the New York Daily News that even after being shot, Paris remained combative. She described hearing the suspect yelling at the cops to get off him while they struggled to handcuff him. Another woman said that she saw Paris acting crazy while Faval tried to figure out what was going on with the parking dispute. She told the Daily News that she and her friend ran the moment they heard gunfire and didn't look back. Faval suffered a deep cut to his thumb from the machete and was treated at a nearby hospital for his injuries. Paris was also taken to an emergency room and survived his injuries. During a search of the suspect, police reportedly found 2 knives in his possession, one with a 6-inch blade and another with an 11-inch blade, with one bystander describing it as looking like a sword. The altercation could have had a much worse outcome if it weren't for the quick-thinking officers who sprang into action to stop a potentially deadly assault from happening. The city's top cops praised Faval and his colleagues for their handling of the situation. News reports claimed that Paris was angry because he felt like he had dibs on a parking space when someone else took it. It's something that pretty much anyone who drives in the Big Apple has experienced at one point or another, and while it's certainly frustrating, most people don't try to resolve these disagreements with violence. Paris was charged with assault on a police officer, 2 counts of attempted assault, 2 counts of menacing a police officer, and 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon.
If someone claimed to be an officer but wasn't wearing a uniform and couldn't provide a badge, tried to order you to do something, would you comply immediately, or would you ignore their commands without proof of their position? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.